Hey, Mike with Nerd Problems Gaming here, and today's video will be doing a review and how to play video on Robot Quest Arena, the board game, so let's get into it. Alright, so now that we've got the game out, let's walk you through a bit more on how you play in the basics, and then I'll jump into my review after that. And so Robot Quest Arena is a robot arena battle game mixed with deck building. And so when it comes to setting up the game, there's some basics that you want to do. I'll be reviewing and showing a two-player version of the setup and how to play at this point, but it functions relatively the same if you have more players as well. And so the first step that you want to do is set up the board. And so you'll find there's different tile pieces that you can place on the map. This is the beginner setup, so if it's your first time playing the game, you want to set it up in this fashion. Again, these are just tile pieces you can move around. After you've played several times, you might want to switch it up how it's laid out, but this is basically the starting setup. On top of that, you'll take these specific cards out of the deck. So Advanced Battery will go on the Advanced Battery slot, Heavy Hammer will go on the Heavy Hammer slot, and Rivet Gun will go on the Rivet Gun spot. To form your player decks, you're going to have 8 battery cards, 1 hammer card, and 1 jump jets card. And so each player will form their deck accordingly with 10 cards. You'll take the player cards, or basically the robot cards, shuffle them up, deal them out, or have players pick their own, whichever option you want to do. In a 2-player game, each player will control 2 robots. In a 3 or 4-player game, each player will just control 1. Again, as I said, we'll set up for a 2-player game in this case, so each player can get the 2 boards, and that's their respective robots that they have. Now that each player has their player boards out, what you'll want to do is set them up. Now in a 2-player game, typically you'll place 6 blue cubes in this section and the remainder of the red cubes and gems in this area. If you do want to play a shorter game though, you can just have less blue cubes in this section. So I'm actually just going to do that for example purposes. But you'll also want to set up each player's character card. And so the little wrenches are indicating the player's health bars for each one of their robots. So you'll place a blue cube on the starting point on each one, and then you'll just fill out the remaining set of cubes. So this player, for example, has 6 red ones in addition to that blue base cube. So you can just have those up there, and then again fill out the rest. These other robots just have 4 health bars in addition to the base blue gem there, and these are both health points and also victory points at the end of the game. Another part of the setup is you're going to create the shop deck, and so you can see here on the board that there's spots for each card, and so again just fill this out until each one of the shop card slots is full. You also want to determine who the first player is. That's just going to be the person that most recently built something, or again, you can randomly choose a player there as well. And then you'll alternate on where you want to put the characters out. Now, each one of these character cards does have a unique ability with it, and the Pug and Rita card, for example, you can spawn that robot in any location among the 9 spaces in the very middle of the board. There's also an extra bonus with those spaces, and if you start your turn with a robot in that area, you'll get 1 victory point per robot. So it's a kind of a cool advantage to be able to do that. Now with that in mind, players will just simply swap back and forth placing their robots. And so let's have Pug and Rita be first. We'll just do 1 there. The next player can choose another starting point. Again, Pug can go there, and then we can place another robot over in this other starting point here. Again, once each player has played their robots, and you'll go and take a specific victory point to start the game depending on what player you are. So the first player will get 0 extra, and the second player will get 1, third player 2, and so on. And so we'll just put an extra 1 here on the victory point pile for the second player. Each player will take their deck, shuffle them up, draw 5 cards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Same thing with the other player. Each player has their starting hand, and now you're ready to begin the game. And so again, the object of the game is to have the most victory points at the end of the game, and you do that by damaging other robots on the board. And so when it comes to playing your turn, there's a specific structure that you'll go through. And so the first thing that you're going to do is do any start of turn phase events And so for example, as I mentioned, this inner circle of tiles, if you have a robot there, you'll get 1 victory point per robot in that area. And so in this case, Pug and Rita, that character has Pug in that space. So they'll just get 1 red cube for a victory point to start their turn. Once you've gone through that, the next step is the respawn phase. So if you did have any robots that had been knocked out in the previous turn, you'll be able to respawn them in any of the locations on the map. In this case with the plus symbol, those are spawning points. Or if you happen to have Pug and Rita and you're respawning that, you could use their special ability to spawn in one of the inner 9 spaces. And when it comes to respawning, how that works, if your robot had been eliminated, say for example, Crate and Rolf had no hit points left and you wanted to respawn them, you would take 1 blue cube from the blue supply and then fill out the rest of their health points accordingly. So we'll put that back though, because no one has needed to respawn yet. And then you'll move on to the main phase. And so the main phase works like most deck building games, where you'll be able to either play cards from your hand to gain power resources in this case, which you could use to purchase new cards from the store or move your character around the board. And so there's 2 options when it comes to playing cards. As I said, you can use them to move one of your robots, and each energy that you spend here at the bottom on your card, so each one of those that you play, can equal 1 movement for your robot. Or you can use that to potentially activate abilities on cards. Some future cards might require power to do that. Otherwise, you can use these to buy cards. So at this point, I've got 5 energy from my batteries, so I can play all of those. And then I could potentially buy cards from the shop worth up to that much energy on the cards. So this one's 4, for example. I could also buy multiple cards. So we've got a 2 energy and a 3 energy. I could buy both of those. And if you do buy a card, it goes directly into your discard pile. So let's say I take this Dash worth 2 and this Optimize worth 3. Now when you do buy a card, you actually replace it immediately, and you can flip that over and potentially buy what comes up immediately. So for example, if I had bought this Overclock, I could flip up the next card, and if I had enough energy, I might be able to buy that next card as well. So at this point, I've played all of my cards on my turn, and then these will go into my discard pile. I will draw 5 new cards, and then it will be the next player's turn. Now again, some cards allow you to play them as movement. So like this card, for example, Jump Jets, it gives me 2 movement, and I can ignore obstacles this turn. And so in this case, let's say I play my Jump Jets. So let's say I play as this red robot, I could do 1, 2. Also, when it comes to movement, you can't move diagonally. And so you only can move vertically or horizontally with your robot. So in this case, again, I have to go around this wall. But if I was here, again, I couldn't go this for 1, it would have to be 1, 2. But again, we'll put it back where I moved it originally. Now I do have attack cards. And so what these numbers mean, the little star symbol is the damage, and then the fist symbol is the type. And so this is a melee attack, meaning that the robot I'm attacking has to be adjacent to me. And so in this case, I'm going to try and move in to attack the Pug robot with my red robot here. So I have more movement still, so I could do 1, 2, spend those for movement, move my character 2. Now I'm within range, and I can use this hammer. It doesn't cost me anything, and it can do 1 damage to the robot. And so I'll do 1 damage to Pug here, meaning I'll take 1 red cube, add it to my victory point pile. I have 1 remaining battery, so I'll look at the shop, see if there's something I can buy. And it looks like I can buy this pneumatic piston item for 1 energy. And again, it goes into my discard pile. Again, wrapping up the turn, I would take 5 cards. That becomes my new hand, and then it goes back to the other player. And again, I bought that card, so I just want to make sure I flip that up for the other player's turn. Another thing that you can do is actually push robots. So if a robot is adjacent to you, you can actually push them. So you can spend 2 energy to push a robot. And so let's say I will do that as Pug here, because now it's this player's turn, and 2 energy to push them away from you. And that simply would move that robot. However, there's another cool feature with pushing enemies is that if they are on a solid structure that they would be pushed into, they don't actually move, they would just take 1 damage. And so I could spend 2 movement as Pug in this case, push this red robot, Strider, into the wall, do 1 damage, take a victory point, in that case, to my pile. So it's another cool thing that you can do. Another even cooler thing is you can actually push robots into other robots. And so in this case, if I was pushing someone as Pug, I could push the green robot into this robot. In that case, neither move, but they would both take 1 damage. So again, I could take 1 victory point from each one of those. Another thing you could do is do an attack that is a ranged attack. And so if I look at this card does 2 damage to any robot I choose within 2 range. And so how that works is range is kind of like a circle around your character. And so directly on your space is 0 range, but 1 range would be the whole square here, 1 space away, and then 2 range would be the entire square 2 spaces away. So since this card had a damage of 2 and a range of 2, I could potentially attack with Pug, this green robot, for 2 damage because it's within 1 range, or I could also do Strider, this red robot, because it's within 2 range, and do 2 damage there as well. Another thing with ranged attacks is that enemies need to be within line of sight. So in this example, you would take a line from the middle area to this robot. I know that Pug is technically on this character's team. However, in this scenario, a direct line of sight is blocked because this is a wall that you can't see through. So I actually could not attack this robot if I wanted to because it's not in line of sight. And different terrain types potentially could block line of sight, so it's something to pay attention to. There's also an option of pulling robots. It works very similar to pushing, and some specific cards might allow you to pull a robot towards you. Now, another thing that might happen on another player's turn, or potentially even on your turn, is that your robot may get knocked out. And so, for example, let's say Pug got knocked out by the other character here. I would remove Pug from the board, and I would have to wait until this player's turn again before Pug could respawn. And so again, you would just simply, as I mentioned before, choose where you want to respawn Pug. Again, they have the special ability to go in the middle somewhere here. I would take 1 blue cube from the supply, and then I would fill up the remaining health cubes on their board. And again, the game ends when you would need to respawn a character and there is no blue cubes left to make them respawn. At that point, players would just simply count the points they have in their victory pile. Again, anytime you damage an enemy, you would take that victory point and place it from their health bar into your victory pile. Each red cube is worth 1 point, each blue cube is worth 2 points, and each gem is worth 5 points at the end of the game. Also, when you're counting victory points, the health cubes left on your active robot cards do not count towards victory points, but in the event of a tie, the player with the most health points left on their player cards would be the winner. Another couple of things that you might encounter as you're playing, one is a card might say scrap, and so what that means, it's basically trashing a card from your play area or your hand, depending on what the card says. And so when that happens, for example, you could trash lower value cards like a battery, potentially, and place them in the scrap heap. So this could free up your deck with more valuable cards and could help you draw better cards faster. Other things to note when it comes to setting up your board, different tiles mean different things. So for example, this is a wall tile. It means you just can't move through it. This is a repair pad. This just means that at the start of your turn, if you have a robot on that tile, they gain 1 red cube and repair 1 health. This is a junkyard. At the start of your turn, if you're on that tile, you can scrap a card in your hand. These are tacks. Whenever you enter this tile, you take 2 damage. These could be a cool thing to push people into to make them take extra damage. The plus signs are respawn points. This tile is a remote terminal. At the start of your turn, if you're on this tile, draw a card and then discard a card. This is a solar farm. At the start of your turn, if you're on this tile, gain an energy. Again, you can use that towards movement or buying cards. This tile is a smoke tile. You probably won't have this in your first few games, but if you add it later as an option on your board, it's an obstacle that blocks line of sight, but not movement. This is a pothole tile. Whenever you enter this tile, you take 1 damage, and it costs 1 extra movement to move your robot off of this tile. Again, another cool one to push people into. And the final option is this trash compactor. Whenever you enter this tile, you scrap the top card of the shop deck, and if it costs 6 or more energy to buy, you're knocked out. This means that you lose all of your health and die. And again, you would need to be respawned on another turn. Overall though, players will go back and forth, as I mentioned, moving their robots around, buying cards to improve their deck, attacking other robots to deal damage and gain victory points. And again, the player with the most victory points at the end of the game will win the game. And gameplay ends when all the blue cubes are gone and you would need to respawn a new robot, but none are left to refill their health bar. At that time, the game is over, and you would count victory points to see who wins. But overall, there's some additional little rules here and there throughout the game, but this is really the basics on how you play and how the game functions. So now that you have a better idea on how it works, let's jump into my review. Well, again, now that you have a chance to learn a bit more on how the game works and how you play it, how do I actually feel about it? Well, I had a lot of fun with this game. I thought it was pretty easy to learn. If you've played any deck building games before, the mechanics are relatively the same as those. It's just more so controlling the robots around the board, and that was pretty easy too. And I think that adds a lot of strategy elements to the game as well. Again, with most deck builders, I think there's a high replay value in general. But this one especially, you can choose different robots to play as, you can set up the game in a bunch of different ways, there's several different strategies you might implement. Again, you might be building a deck to do a lot of damage, maybe it's buying powerful cards, maybe you're pushing robots around the board, maybe you're strategically moving them around to give you advantages based on specific spaces. Again, there's a lot of different options. I also like that you can really alter how long the game might take to create either really short play sessions or maybe a longer one if you choose to. Again, you just alter how many blue cubes you have present for the number of players that you're playing with. And again, this can limit the number of respawns, leading to a quicker game. So I like that ability to tweak that. And I think that also adds to the replay value as well. I think the quality of the components are really great. The little miniature robots were really well done and very solid. I also really like the structure of the playboard. That's one thing that I really enjoy when it comes to deck building games. If they can give you some type of play mat or board to lay out. This one was especially easy to navigate. It had the labels of where you put the different cards right on the board. So again, that's very convenient and aids with the setup process and just really streamlines your learning curve as well. I think it's fun as a 2-player game, and if you expand it up to 4 players or 3 as well, that's a lot of fun. And again, as I mentioned, you'll likely want to try it out with different robot combinations, different strategies as you play through the game, and much more. I think it's also a good combination of the deck building itself, but having those additional arena battle mechanics to the game. I think that adds another layer of fun beyond just the deck building base of the game as well. Overall, I think this game's a lot of fun. If you want to check it out, if you like deck builders, if you like arena battle games, this is a really cool combination of both. I think it's great for younger players, but adults as well, as it does have that cute theme to the game. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Have you played this game before? Does it look like a lot of fun to you now that you know a bit more on how to play the game? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you did want to pick up a copy of this game and learn more about it, I'll have links in the description below where you can do so. And if you wanted to help support the channel, pick out content and more, consider becoming a patron of ours at nerdproblemsgaming.com/Patreon. And another really cool way you can help support the channel is we actually partnered with a game store, Nutmeg Games. So if you head to nutmeggames.com/nerdproblemsgaming or use our promo code nerdproblemsgaming at checkout, you'll actually get 10% off your order and help support the channel at the same time. And so if you like board games, Pokemon cards, Magic cards, and more, and want to take advantage of that great discount, head to the link in the description below and use our promo code at checkout. And if you like videos like this on video games, board games, and everything nerdy, check out one of our other videos here. And if you haven't done so yet, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell notifications to get the latest updates of new nerd videos we put out. But once again, thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you more soon.